All right, everyone, we are live. All right, so good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Caribbean Diaspora Vibes. My name is Donna Morton Morgan. I am the president of Caribbean American Diaspora, president of Women of Culture Incorporated, real estate broker, and life coach at Inner Vibes Consultant. So we want to welcome everyone and for an amazing lineup. But first, hi, Dr. Arlene. How are you this evening?
I am great, and it's wonderful to be here. It is a wonderful evening, and I'm so excited.
Yes, we always have an amazing, and each week it gets even more amazing. All right, brand new year, lots of info. We want to have our attorney, the woman of the hour, to introduce herself. I'm going to be sharing to her different pages, and then we're going to jump right into what everybody's waiting to hear about, which are the immigration updates
Yep.
2025.
Hi, I'm Sasha Watson. I am an immigration attorney based out of Orlando, Florida. We have a nationwide practice. I've been doing this. This is my 18th year. We're celebrating 15 years as a firm in 2025. And, we're in here, just excited to be here to share with you, share the knowledge, kind of ease some of the concerns and the anxieties and the fears and really have an honest educational discussion about what's going on and what's actually things that we need to be concerned about in terms of immigration.
So before we get started, tell us a little bit about your company, the name, social media handles, so people can go ahead and.
So our firm is HAWM Law, having an attorney when it matters. As I said, we're based out of Orlando, Florida. You can find us on almost all social media outlets, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Our handle is HAWM Law. That's HAWM Law. You can reach us at 407-802-3223. If you do want to have an actual one-on-one confidential consultation about your particular immigration situation.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. So, Attorney Sasha Watson, tell us. We're only in the first month of beautiful
Yes,
2025.
this
Well,
is
we
day
were
8.
expecting, right? We were expecting some changes, but and a lot of times we have to let people know we see things on social media, it's fast, it's moving. Not everything is accurate. We want people to be informed and not in fear, right?
Right,
Informed,
right,
not in fear. So,
right.
we're gonna you take it away and tell us what we need to know. Tell us, and we'll be
So
checking the chats.
so we are day 8, right? This is day 8 of the Trump administration. And we've had sweeping changes, right? Lots of things going on in the first 7 days. So this is really a recap of those 7 days and what's been going on. So first thing first, there's really been one new law that has been enacted. It hasn't been signed by the president, but we expect him to sign that shortly, and that's the Laken Riley Act. That act started to make its progress even before Donald Trump took office. Everything else that we've seen happen over the last 7 days are what we call executive orders. Executive orders are not laws, right? They don't trump our statutes. They don't take precedence over the Constitution. An executive order is really a policy directive of the president, right? The governor of a state can issue executive orders, but really they are mandates on what the president or a governor wants to accomplish as part of their mandate in their administration. These are not laws, right? These executive orders should typically align with the existing laws in order to fulfill the mandate of whatever administration we have. So that's number one. The law has not changed, right? There is one law that is new that we expect to be signed. It's a bill. Let me just take that back. It's an existing bill that is making its way to the president. He should sign it in short order. And then that will be the newest law that we have that will affect immigration, right? And that is the Laken Riley Act. There hasn't been any other new laws. These are all policy changes, meaning how the administration is going to carry out the existing laws of the land. So we've got several of those, and I'm kind of going to do a quick rundown summary. Feel free to jump in and get an idea, question and answers. I love that. I love being interactive. So, but I can talk all day. Occupational hazard. That's my job. I get paid to talk, and I do a lot of that. So as of today, we have the first executive order. You'll see me looking down because I am not an encyclopedia, so I like to keep notes to make sure I'm accurate on what I'm talking about. But it was Executive Order 14156, which was protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. And this is the executive order that went directly to the birthright citizenship issue. This particular law said that if a child is born in the United States to an undocumented mother, right? Or could be a documented mother, meaning that a person here on a temporary visa, a visitor, a worker, as long as it's not a green card holder or a citizen, and the father of the child is not a green card holder or a citizen, the child would not be a US citizen. That is the crux of that particular executive order. It was slated to go into effect on February 20th, 30 days after the effective of the signing date of the executive order. However, 22 states of the 50 filed lawsuits, and an injunction has already been issued on this from Washington. What that means is not that the executive order is off the table altogether, but it is now in litigation and it is on hold until a court decides whether this is in fact a lawful executive order. If it is not lawful, which is what we believe it to be, that it is in direct conflict with the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution, which basically says that anyone born here who are subject to the jurisdiction hereof, right, are US citizen. And that is the language that is in dispute in the Constitution, that language regarding about subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Generally, you would perceive that language to kind of carve out diplomats. That's really where you're talking about. If you are a foreign diplomat and you have been granted admission to the United States to serve in your diplomatic capacity, you are considered not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, but to the jurisdiction of your home country for which you are exercising diplomatic powers. And therefore, when diplomats have their children in the United States, those children typically under the law are not US citizens. So that is that is the traditional reading of that phrase. And that is what the Trump administration has said. If you've entered the country illegally, right? Or if you are here only for a temporary purpose, you are not necessarily subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And that is what is in dispute here. But for now, we don't have to worry about it as it makes its way through litigation. We suspect this will probably be a case that will go up to the US Supreme Court for a final decision, right? So we have to watch that and see how it plays out. But for now, it's on hold, right? Go ahead.
So when we see where ICE is going into schools right now and like just removing kids, what's that?
So these are policy directives, right? Again, there hasn't been an executive order per se, but the Department of Homeland Security has rescinded its policy memo that basically said churches, schools, hospitals are off limits, right? Quote unquote safe zones that they would not exercise any operations during in those spaces. And the premise behind that is that you want people to come into court and be witnesses in cases. You want them to press charges against criminals, right? Most states in the union have a mandatory law that requires all children within their territory to attend school, and therefore we are not going to pull children out of schools. And that was the policy memo. Same thing with churches. Those churches are sanctuaries, and they have since rescinded that policy memo, right? What I will say is that in order for ICE to go into a church or a school, they have to have a warrant, right? Outside of having a warrant, they have to have permission to do so, right? And that is where the debate is happening now. Which school districts are saying or acquiescing and saying, we will grant the permission, we will not stand in the way, we will not be a barrier to ICE's enforcement operations, but that is by expressed permission, right? In most cases, almost 90 to 95% of ICE raids, they are conducted without judicial warrants, right? These are administrative warrants, basically pieces of paper that are signed by ICE officials, supervisors, right? Okay. That's what most of these warrants and quote unquote arrest warrants are. They're not by a federal judge. At any point, ICE has a federal warrant to go into a church or a school. Believe me, they're going in there. And that's under any administration, right? I personally have had a case, and it's only happened one time in my 18-year career, where ICE has come into a courtroom. I was handling a family law custody dispute, and ICE came in and arrested one of the parties to the case in the middle of our court proceedings. But they had a judicial warrant because in that particular case, the parent had very, very serious criminal convictions. They had been deported more than once and had returned to the United States, right? And I'll tell you, in that particular case, the person who was arrested was the mother, not the father, right? But they had a warrant to do so, and it was very serious circumstances. If a person is being arrested pursuant to a judicial warrant, that's going to happen under any administration, under any policy, right? For the most part, we are in the Trump administration's show of force phase. This is what I like to call it, is a show of force operations. So where do you get the most emotional response is when you say we're picking up children from schools, we're picking up, we're going into churches or places that were traditionally considered safe zones, right? Because it gets you worked up. It gets the emotional, and it also on both sides of the aisle, right? No matter what your opinions are on the issue, it is going to get you emotionally involved, right? But I can guarantee you that if there is a serious enough case that warrants an arrest by and a warrant has issued by a judge, ICE has traditionally gone in and done what they had to do in those situations, right? ICE has gone into schools. You know, I've heard colleagues of mine as well having their clients question in school. I know about one particular incident here in Lake County. I don't know if that's a formal operation. It was one child was questioned. They were released to the parents. There was no arrest and apprehension of the children. I do believe as the days unfold that there are more incidents of people being picked up, right? But it is happening. There is a rescission of the memo that protected those areas. Do I anticipate this will be a constant recurring feature? of the enforcement operations? I do not. And part of that is a lack of resources, right? The manpower required to go in to places like churches, schools, the swap shop, the flea markets. It requires tremendous amount of resources to do that, and collaboration as well with local law enforcement who have real crime fighting responsibilities. So unless they're going after, it's a targeted operation after certain individuals, we're not going to see this continue once we get past the show of force phase of the Trump administration. So that's on the churches and schools. The other executive order, I'll go into the next one, is Executive Order 14157, which is securing our borders. There has been a declaration of basically a national emergency on our southern borders. And with that, we are having the National Guard go out to secure the southern border, to ramp up their operations on the southern border, and to start or to resume construction of the wall, and to restart what was called the Remain in Mexico program, which was a program established under the previous Trump administration, which required asylum seekers to remain in Mexico, wait for appointments for their credible fear interview. If they passed the interview, then they would be allowed to enter into the US. So the Trump administration has signaled or stated that they plan to restart that program. It is my understanding that there may not be full cooperation with the Mexico government on re-implementing that program. So it's in flux as to what will actually play out. They have halted, put a pause on, well, this is Executive Order 14155, which is deals with the refugee admissions program. A refugee is really a person who is outside of the United States. So these people have not yet entered the United States, who have a credible fear of persecution in their home country, and they are fleeing that persecution, and they have applied from outside of the United States for refugee status. And it is a very lengthy and exhaustive process, right? They have to be vetted. They have to wait for the availability for these appointments. And sometimes it takes several years to get accepted into the refugee program. If they are accepted and approved, they then come into the United States, and we consider them to be what we call asylees at that point. When, if a person applies for asylum in the United States, we consider them an asylee if that's approved. If you're outside applying for the same benefit, we consider you to be a refugee. They have halted that program, very devastating. They have canceled pending interviews. They are saying it is completely on hold. And of course, there are thousands of people across the world who were waiting for these interviews or had interviews that are genuinely fleeing devastating situations, right? And I think for us, I think most of my audience here for the program today are Caribbean nationals. A lot of us, the vast majority of people coming from the Caribbean to the United States, we come here for economic opportunities and advancement, right? With the exception right now of Haitian nationals, the vast majority of the rest of the Caribbean diaspora come here for economic advantages, whether it's attending school, jobs, and things like that. But there are people across the world that are coming to the United States to actually seek refuge from persecution, right? These are life or death decisions, right? People who have lost, and I have them as my clients, who have lost their entire families to civil wars and violence and things like that. They're not coming here necessarily for jobs. They're coming here for safety. So it's something that is hard to balance, especially for a lot of people from the diaspora, because or purview or looking glasses on this issue is really centered around the thought of economic advancement and not human rights issues. But that's that program. There's been another executive order which designates cartels and other organizations as foreign terrorist organizations. And so they've designated certain groups as terrorists, which you can expect, some of the major cartels, MS-13, and some of the other ones. That's what that is about. People say that's not a big deal. That's not an issue, right? But what you run into here is that, and what a lot of advocates who practice in the humanitarian forum and who represent a lot of asylum seekers, the issue becomes where people pay couriers, right? Or coyotes, as they call them,
Right.
to help transport them into the United States. We've seen over the last couple of years a ramp up, even in Jamaicans taking that Mexico route into the United States, and they tend to be aided by individuals, transporters, right? The government calls them human traffickers, right? The meaning that you are paying people to bring you in to the United States. The problem then becomes is that a lot of those individuals tend to be affiliated with cartels and gangs. And if you have paid one of these entities to aid you in your travel to the United States, you have now sponsored a foreign terrorist organization and maybe denied all types of benefits in the future.
Wow.
Right? So that is one of the major concerns when it comes to that particular order. We also have another one that says there's been an influx, a massive influx of immigrants into the United States, and they're trying to call it an invasion, right?
Okay.
The Trump administration I give them credit in doing their homework, right? They have gone all the way back to use laws that have been in existence sometimes since the 17, 18, 1900s, right? They're using very archaic laws to facilitate their mission of removing immigrants. And this is one of them, by declaring there has been an invasion of aliens into the United States, right?
Right.
What I do anticipate that they may want to invoke at some point, they have not actually done it, is the Alien Enemies Act, right? I believe that's from 1847, 1867. Don't quote me, I'm not an encyclopedia. But if they did invoke that act in the future, it would allow them to basically use martial law, to use the army to go into civilian spaces to arrest immigrants, right? But so they've started on that road by doing the alien invasion, declaring an invasion.
Let's see
Go
before if we have, I know Louis had just jumped on. Louis, are you there? You are muted.
I'm still here. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, man. Oh, you were at the Pine Hills.
Yes. I got an opportunity to come up because I didn't get a chance to give respect to Brother All.
Right.
So they are doing something special for him today. Mayor Demings is here. Quite a bit of the councils are here as well, and nice turnout, a nice evening, and I think they're doing some award now, giving out some things here, but quite a bit of people is here in the community this evening.
All right. Do you have any questions on this subject of immigration?
Well, the best I can say, really, I know there's a lot of fever in the air going on right now, Donna. And, there are a lot of people are getting anxious about what is to be expected. based on what Donald Trump is, the new government is actually doing. My advice to everybody is really to prepare to see, and when you're preparing yourself, you are also looking on your total persons, your family, because a lot of us don't get the chance to really dig into ourselves, make sure so we passport right, make sure money in the bank, make sure things is in place. A lot of us don't do this. So this craziness that's going on now will allow us, a lot of us, instead of getting panicking and going on, then I think we should just take our time, make sure that we're solid in the country. Solid in the country, money wise, your house wise, whatever the case. If you can buy a house now, a time to buy a house, not even sit down on the side and wait. Plant yourself here if that's what we want to do. And forget about, get rid of all of the other things that is going on because they're all distraction. It's all distraction. So I think my advice is for everybody from our region, the Caribbean, dig yourself, plant yourself. We know if we plant yam and dasheen and banana, we dig the hole big, a big hole, plant ourselves in the country. Get our business. If we are thinking of starting a business, get into the business. This is the time to do it because one of the things we have to remember, Donald Trump is a businessman. So there are a lot of loopholes he's going to open for anybody who is thinking about buying a business. So the more we can plant ourselves here, even if some of us get deported, guess what? You have a little business where money are come a yard. You set up your retirement and everything that you need to be, money coming to you. So I think this is the time, instead of getting panicky, let's dig ourselves deeper and stronger, become stronger people financially, educationally. Whatever we need to do now is the time to encourage our young people. Forget about all this distraction and plant yourself in a solid foundation in America.
Awesome. We do realize that deportations have been going on for
long time.
Long time.
Long time.
But like what Attorney Sasha says, this is like a showcase. This is a little extra, right? Because it's coming with like, I'm going to show you.
It's a show of force. It's a show of force phase, right? You got to come in strong, satisfy the base. But realistically, where we are right now and what we're seeing every single day on our media is unsustainable, right? And let me give you some reality where that is concerned. Prior, as part of the Laken Riley Act, I submitted a report to Congress. And in that report, I says it presently only had 3,000 beds available, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have the capacity, right? They had somewhere like 62,000 beds available nationwide. And at that time, 59,000 were already taken, right? That is the reality. The resources don't exist. The government has instituted a hiring freeze. They cannot hire enough officers to do the job.
Right.
I said we needed, to ramp up to do what you're asking to even minimally accomplish it. They needed something like $800 million or something crazy to get it done, right? So lack of resources is really going to limit the ability to be able to round up the how many million Americans. I mean, undocumented immigrants that is claimed to be here, right?
Yeah, so I can definitely understand and see how that first 2 weeks you got to come out kicking and strong. And remember, our president was, reality TV. So having that presence of having you, just gripping and all of that, we know that's part of who this government, this administrative is. So we do have to be careful not to fall into the fear mode, because fear creates sickness, et cetera, et cetera. be informed. But it's good that you pointed out, Attorney Sasha, that you got to put, where are you going to put people, and so forth. So it is a big scare tactic going on right now. We do see it in front of our eyes, and
it will impact it. There are some people that will be personally impacted by this, right? If your loved one has been detained and is slated for deportation, you are personally affected by it, but it's still a small percentage of people right now that are going to get swept up in this show of force phase. The mass deportation that is being promised by the administration is not likely to happen, right? Will you know somebody who may get deported? Possibly. The priority for the government, because of how they have to manage their resources, will of course be first criminal aliens, right?
Right.
That's
And
going to be number
I
one.
don't think anyone objects that. So
I think you're going to have nationwide support for the deportation of criminals, right? And then you're going to have people who already have removal orders. Those are going to be your top priority, right? They've also, and we didn't touch on this, but as part of the program, their policy, they have really gone after what they call expedited removal, right? Which is already a part of our law, right? This is not something new. It's always been there, but the Trump administration is using it at a more advanced level. Expedited removal means that if you have been in the country, you entered the country illegally, right? This is not for people who came here legally. This is for people who entered the country illegally within the past 2 years. Those individuals could be removed under the expedited removal process, meaning you bypass court and you get directly on a plane and go home. Right? So that's why you hear people talking about carrying around evidence that you've been here for 2 years, so forth and so on. But that's really for people who've been here for less than 2 years. If you've been here for longer than 2 years, you're likely going to get placed in deportation proceedings. You're going to have the due process constitutional rights afforded to you by the US Constitution, right? Under the Fifth Amendment, which mean you have to be noticed, you go to court and you get to fight your way through the court process, which also presents another challenge, right? The immigration court system has been backlogged for 10 years at least, right? When I say backlogged, in most of the immigration courts, and I can tell you where I am here in Orlando, Florida, for most people, if you're getting a case set for trial or even a hearing, your hearing dates are in 2027, 2028. Donald Trump will be out on his way out. And if there is an influx of cases into that system without a lot of resources put towards it to hire more attorneys, hire more judges on the government side, we're looking at court dates really extending into 2030 and beyond, right? So this is not going to be a short fix, short solution to say we're just going to deport people. Right? So right now, the focus is going to be on the low-hanging fruit, the people who are subject to expedited removal and the people who've already gone through the court system and have received removal orders.
Yes. And we did see a list of removal orders that which was actually in place in November 2024. And I think it was Jamaica. It was like over 5,000 people. And I see Dr. Arlene have a question. Go ahead, Dr. Arlene.
I have a question for Attorney Watson. If someone is, has their alien card, and I don't know if they will be, a lot of people who have this status are concerned that they might be sent home. So just in case if that happens, they have worked here, they have their retirement or homes or whatever benefits they've been getting from the government, would all those be terminated?
So let me just clarify the question. You're saying if someone is presently here, they do have lawful status. Let's say, for example, they're a permanent resident, they have a green card.
Yeah.
And for some reason they get deported.
Yes.
Will they have access to their social security benefits? And is that the question?
Yes. Just social security.
The answer is no. The answer is no. In order to access social security benefits, and we're talking about retirement benefits, disability benefits, right, from the US government, you have to have lawful status, right? You have to be able to prove that you are a resident or a US citizen in order to access those benefits. And this is something that I run into with people who are here all the time, in the sense that they, for whatever reason, they may be a US citizen, they can't prove their citizenship, and therefore they can't access their benefits. But to get those benefits, you have to have that status. If you have, let's say, a private retirement account, if you have an IRA or you have a 401k that was through your employer, you would still get those benefits, right? That's a private agreement between you and your bank to have those funds, right? There's nothing that prevents people who come from foreign countries from investing in the United States. They will take your money all day long, and they're entitled to give you those benefits per your plan. But what you will not have access to is those social security retirement benefits. Once you lose your lawful status, or if for whatever reason you can't prove it, they would stop issuing those benefits to you.
Oh,
thank you.
Yeah, it's tough. And I think Mr. Witter, who was on, one of the things that he did say is like, now is not the time to necessarily bury our head in the sand, right? There are so many people who have green cards that are eligible for their citizenship, but for one reason or another, they have not applied, right?
mm-hmm.
I can tell you right now that if the government wanted to, right, they may not have enough of a majority in place just yet to do it. But if they were to get the majority that they need in Congress, they could very well change all the requirements. They could move it from being 5 years to 10 years or 15 years to get your citizenship. They can make it be that you have to pay this or do this or increase the hurdles required to get your citizenship, right? All you need to do right now is be a resident for 5 years, have good moral character, and take the test. And you have a lot of people who have their green cards that still have not done that. The question is why, right? If you don't have your citizenship, you can be deported. It's nothing is set in the stone for you. You are not a citizen of the United States and you are subject to deportation. If you have your green card and it's expired, right? Let's say for whatever reason you can't get your citizenship, or you don't want it because you want to be prime minister of your country one day. Mm-hmm. Fine. Why do you have an expired green card? All green card holders are required by law, and this is a law that's been on the book from ever since from Wappy was at Kill Phillip, right? That you are required to carry your green card with you, right? So all permanent residents must have their green card on them at all times, like your driver's license. That's the existing law, right? When you go to apply or to renew your green card, renewal of your green card is equivalent to renewal of your driver's license. It does not mean you have to take the test over. It does not have to mean that you prove that you're entitled to it. It's really just updating your picture, updating your fingerprints, and you get your card. It is what we call a non-adjudicatory process. It doesn't matter what criminal history you have, the government renews the card and gives it to you. Getting your citizenship is difficult. If you have criminal history, you need to consult an attorney before you apply, because when you go to apply for your citizenship, they look at whether your green card was granted properly from the beginning of time. Did you make a mistake? Did you lie, misrepresent? Did we as the agency make a mistake and give it to you improperly? They have to do that before they grant you your citizenship. It's not the same when you go to renew the green card. So there is no excuse for you not to renew the green card. But if you are a green card holder and you get stopped for whatever reason, and you're asked for proof of your status in terms of your green card, you are violating the law by not having that document on you. And that existed before Trump. They're just using it.
Right. So you said again, so if you have a green card, you could be subject to
deportation. Yeah. There's no guarantee. The only guarantee against deportation, right, is being a citizen. They cannot deport you from a country that you're a citizen of. It doesn't mean that all green card holders will be deported. It just means that if, for example, you fall into one of the grounds of deportation for whatever reason, you've committed a lie, you lied on an application, or you lied at some point in your immigration process, you could have committed a crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that make you deportable. That's what would put you in that realm.
Okay.
So that gets me to the Laken Riley Act. So this is the newest law. I mentioned it early, that is on the table. And it's really a law, that has come about as a result of the death of Laken Riley. She was a 22-year-old Georgia college student who was killed by an undocumented alien. She was in 2024 when she went out for jogging, and she was brutally murdered. It was a sad, horrific situation. In response to that, the bill was introduced into Congress, and it should be signed by the president. It has passed the House, it has passed the Senate, and it is now on the, headed to the president's desk for signing. I think we are, as a country, in agreement that criminal aliens need to be punished. That is, there's no dispute. Right. But what this act is slated to do, for example, and how we get it matched with Laken Riley, was that particular undocumented alien had been arrested for a petty crime, right? He had been previously arrested for petty theft and was released. And because of the nature of the offense that he was arrested for, there was no basis to detain him for a long-term period. And what the legislatures had said, had there been a law that made it stricter or that mandated the detention of an individual for these types of offenses, he would not have murdered Laken Riley, right? So because of that, we have this law that will now require mandatory detention. Mandatory detention, we already have it for certain offenses under our Immigration and Nationality Act, but it expands the types of offenses for which you will be held without eligibility for an immigration bond indefinitely, right? To include theft-related crimes, which could include burglary, larceny, or something as simple as shoplifting, right? Assaulting a law enforcement officer, and any kind of crime that involves death or serious bodily injury, including manslaughter doing as a result of a DUI, okay? And I know a lot of people are going to hear me say that and say, well, that doesn't sound so bad, right? But what we do not appreciate is that, for example, if we also practice criminal law in my practice, and what we see a lot of is, for example, are resisting an officer, resisting a law enforcement officer without violence, right? Telling an officer no. It's the default arrest, you know? You didn't agree, you didn't follow this lawful command, and now you're under arrest. And a lot of time those offenses will get thrown out, you know, because it was really an abuse of the law enforcement officer's power. But under the Laken Riley Act, you don't require a conviction. A charge is enough, an arrest is enough. And that's problematic. Shoplifting, right? Theft. You know, people run into situations. You may go in and, you know, you don't even intend to steal something and you walk out and now you've been accused of the crime of shoplifting. And now you are sitting in an immigration facility indefinitely where we have significant backlogs. They do expedite people who are detained to resolve their cases, but you will be there without the eligibility of getting a bond, right? So even though we want to put these strenuous measures in place, these laws don't take into consideration that we also have significant problems with our criminal justice system that tends to punish, right, and criminalize Black and Brown people more than any other individual. And so when you couple that with immigration laws and immigration consequences, immigrants pay higher consequences as a result. So the pushback from advocates tends to be centered around that, right? The extreme punishments that we face as immigrants as a result of this, and the fact that we're getting sucked into the justice system sometimes unfairly. So it also gives the state authority to sue the federal government for not doing their job on immigration enforcement, right? Historically, and as part of the separation of powers and how responsibilities are aligned in the federal government, immigration enforcement and activity has been squarely determined to be part of the federal powers. That means states don't get to go out and round up immigrants and set their own immigration laws, right? And the idea is that we have a uniformed immigration system that applies to everywhere in the country, right? You can choose to live in Florida and be governed by Florida's family laws. And if you don't like it, you can go to Georgia or New York, whose laws are different. But if you're coming into the country and you want to immigrate here, the idea is that we have a uniformed system of laws. This is saying the state can sue, and this gives the states power to enforce their own laws to aid in the federal government's role. And that is part of the laws that we see coming out of Tallahassee this week, where the governor has called a special session to implement Florida legislation that will aid the Trump administration in enforcing that. The governor has gotten some pushback on that. The legislature did convene. They did a ceremonial gavel in and gavel out, which was, you know, for lack of a better term, performatory, because they then turn around and introduce their own bill that took some of the power away from the governor. And they want the power to be with the Agricultural Commission to be the chief immigration officer. And in a positive note, as part of that enforcement law or proposed bill, they are saying schools are off limit and children are off limit. And we will not, as a state, participate in an immigration enforcement in schools or the detention of minor children, which is a departure from the Trump administration policy at this time. We don't know what would ultimately happen because that is something that is making its way through the state legislature.
Wow. So you mentioned earlier about removal orders. So we found today a list of removal orders actually dated November 2024. So what we're probably seeing play out right now in that showboat era is this. So we have a list of individuals from different Caribbean countries. We have Jamaica, 5,120 individuals expected or actually on the removal order. Trinidad and Tobago, 1197. Guyana, 1236. St. Lucia, 202. St. Kitts, 68. St. Vincent, 127. Barbados, 323. Grenada 149, Antigua and Barbuda 110, Dominica 104, the Bahamas 709. So that was actually on the list already.
Is that a nationwide list?
This is yeah, I actually have another one. I mean, I have even like Mexico has oh my God, Colombia has over 27,000 people. DR has 12,000. We've got some big numbers. El Salvador,
Yeah.
203.
So what I suspect, I have not seen the list with the actual numbers, but what that sounds like to me, that is a list that says how many people may be currently present in the United States with removal orders already against them, right? And so let me just tell you practically, a person may go into removal proceedings and the judge may order them removed because they don't qualify for any relief, right? The whole purpose of the immigration court is so that when you come out on the other side, you would have a green card and a lawful means to live in the United States. That, of course, is not the case for every case. You may have applied for asylum, and asylum is a very, very specific type of relief that if you don't meet all the requirements, it's going to be denied. So those individuals have gotten orders to be removed from the United States. Those orders don't tend to be executed right away. And in some cases, for decades, people live in the United States with removal orders, right? And we do a lot of work reopening those cases. Let's say, for example, you got a removal order. And at the time when you got the removal order, you had a 5-year-old, right, who is a US citizen. That 5-year-old child could not couldn't file a petition for you because you have to be 21 to file a petition for a parent, right? Or anybody. So now, years later, your child becomes 21 years old, is a US citizen, and then files a petition for that parent. That parent can go back in, reopen their removal case, and get a green card, right? So it doesn't mean that these are individuals that have criminal history and have been ordered to leave the country because they are violent criminals and so forth, right? They could be individuals that at the time of their removal order, there was no lawful mechanism that existed in order for them to normalize their status, right? And I want you to appreciate that what has happened, right? In the 1980s, many individuals were in the United States without status, and we had several programs. We had what's called a special agricultural worker program that said if you were in the United States and you worked on a farm or did any kind of farm work for 6 months, apply for a green card, right? You had that amnesty program that if you came from the Western Hemisphere, right, and that's coming through the 60s and 70s and 80s, if you were coming from any country in the Western Hemisphere and you are here, you can apply for the green card, right? Fast forward to 2001, we had what's called the Life Act that said, if you are here in the country, doesn't matter how you came into the country, whether it's legal, illegally, as long as you're undocumented right now and you have a family member file a petition for you, you can get a green card. It was a special type of amnesty program to allow people to normalize their status. We haven't had a program like that since 2001, 24 years. We saw it about every decade, and that's why the numbers are so high in terms of undocumented individuals. To say, hey, these are people with no criminal history, they have family members, give them a path. And there is high resistance to creating that path that we did not have in the past. So the fact that you see those numbers, 24,000, 50,000, whatever the number is, doesn't mean that those individuals are criminal aliens.
Correct.
It just means that they have the removal orders, and possibly some of them, a percentage of them, could still get their green card eventually.
Right. We were wondering if that's the beginning of what we're seeing, if maybe that those people are from that list.
It's very possible. Like I said, that's going to be low-hanging fruit from the government. If you already have a removal order, you are definitely at high risk. And it's also, a lot of people who have removal orders, they have mandatory reporting requirements to ICE. They go in and they do these ICE check-ins where ICE knows where they are, they're doing this, and they may just decide, hey, we're going to take you in today. We're going to detain you. And really, it comes down to an issue of logistics. Let me just tell you, there are lots of people who are detained. ICE conducts deportation flights usually once a month to most countries, right? So they wait until, usually within a month, for example, in Jamaica, where we do have high numbers, if they have a plane full of individuals, they're going to do that deportation flight that month, okay? So that happens for various countries. You got to have planes, you got to have pilots, you got to have all these resources to make it happen. And you got to be able to detain the person pending that actual execution of the removal. So it's a lot of logistics, a lot of resources that are involved that at this time to do mass deportation is in fact difficult.
We do have a question from the audience. Is there anything that ministers and pastors can do through First Amendment, freedom of religion, to keep ICE from coming in, disturbing our worship services, arresting people on holy ground, and deporting them? He says that church was once considered sanctuary cities. Could we use the First Amendment to fight against this injustice?
Well, so I'll answer it in two folds, right? Number one, ICE detaining an individual in a church does not restrict your First Amendment right to the free practice of your religion, right? So those are two conflated issues. But as a church or a religious organization, you absolutely have the right to bar ICE from coming into the sanctuary if they do not have a warrant signed by a judge. Not their administrative flimsy warrant, right? Unless the board of the church or the pastor who is the designated representative of the organization grants authority for them to come in, ICE cannot enter your facility without your permission. That's the bottom line. If they have a judicial warrant, then you need to step aside because you would be held in contempt of court. You could be charged with obstruction of justice, right? For disobeying a warrant. But if they don't have a warrant, you can gladly say, we do not grant you permission to come inside the sanctuary to execute that. And they definitely do not have the ability to come into any private areas of the facility. What churches can do is really communicate to their congregation if they have a heavily immigrant congregation. And I say immigrant in the sense that those people could be documented or undocumented. Don't believe that because the people in your church have become citizens or have their green cards doesn't mean you're at risk, right? Because the idea in a show of force is that we're going to target where that population will be most traumatized, right? So as a congregation, as a church board, you should now be coming together and actually putting in place a policy. What is going to be your policy if ICE does show up at your church? What is our public communication going to be? who is the designated contact person within the church to address the issue with ICE? Do we want ICE officers talking to everybody or anybody they first see, right? You have to have a collective plan to say that if they do show up, everybody is going to point them in the direction of the designated representative, and the representative is aware of the policy. Does your church go into lockdown? Meaning we have safe areas within our facility that we know the only way that they can get into there, aside from the public area of the church, right? That they will need a warrant to get into. And if that does happen, we will direct our members into that space, right? So almost like an active shooter drill. You go into lockdown. And a lot of schools across the country are instituting a similar policy that if ICE shows up, we go into lockdown and we have to evaluate the validity of warrants first before we allow ICE onto our compound, right? Preparation, knowing what your response is going to be the most critical thing for any congregation at this point. Get together, have a written policy, communicate that policy to your leadership and to your membership is what needs to happen.
Amazing information. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. For answering our questions and informing us. I'm still stuck on the green card holders. Green card holders could be, you know, and especially if you mess up and have some, you know, something silly, some, you know, stupid, petty crime or something like that. So is it too late for people can still go ahead and apply for citizenship, or what do you?
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, the laws haven't changed, right? So if you know, if you have a friend, if you have a family member that you apply for the green card, start the process, get the process going. If you have a green card, go get your citizenship. If you have criminal history, go see an attorney and evaluate your risk exposure if you apply for your citizenship. Don't sit by idly and do nothing, right? Because trouble comes when you least expect it, right? And so if you don't have a plan, it's going to be even more difficult for you to address those issues. I'll tell you a couple of things before we run off, because I think we're at the end, Donna.
Yes.
Okay, if you suspect somebody has been detained by ICE, you can't locate them, you suspect you don't know where they are, and you expect that immigration has picked them up, there is an online detainee locator system. You can go on the ICE online detainee locator system, enter their name, country of birth, date of birth, and it will tell you if they have been detained by ICE. It could take up to 72 hours for that person to appear in the online detainee locator system. They don't give you a location while a person is in transit or in transportation. Another recommendation that I have, if you fall into the high risk category, meaning that you entered within the last 2 years, you already have a deportation order, or for whatever reason you have criminal history that you're concerned about, I recommend you put in place some what I call pre-need documentation. You want to put together a power of attorney that will give somebody the ability to handle your financial and business affairs in the event you are detained. That person could have access to your bank accounts, just be able to cut off the light bill so you're not having to pay that light bill while you're detained. You can appoint someone as what we call a pre-need guardian for your children, right? Update your pickup lists at the schools for who can pick up your children. If you are undocumented, you have a fear that wherever your child is attending school, their policies with regards to ICE is not clear and you're concerned, make sure you have a resident or a US citizen who is on that pickup list, And you can also put together guardianship documents to appoint that person as a guardian for the child if, in fact, you get detained by ICE. Those are immediate needs that will need to be addressed. It's my understanding that in New York, there were some kids that were left at school because I don't know if it was in fact ICE raids occurred at the school or rumors, the rumors alone will prevent people from acting. So there were 2 children that were left at school, is my understanding, and those children have gone into state care because they were abandoned by the parents. Don't get left flat-footed. Update your contact information with the schools to put someone you trust in place that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm scared. I don't want to go and pick up Jenny. Can you go to the school, pick up Jenny and bring her home for me? Right? That's part of the planning process. I get this note all the time because I need to mention it. You do not need COVID-19 vaccines. A lot of people are happy about that change. The Trump administration has removed that as a requirement to get your green card. So when you go to do the medicals, you do not have to get the vaccine and you don't have to get the booster anymore, right? If you are not a green card holder and you only have a travel document, stay put unless it's a life or death emergency or you're going to travel for medical care. Don't go anywhere. All right? That's all I have.
Man, when I tell you, wait, we've got one question. Someone was asking about if you came in, if you came in on someone else's name or something like that, is it an automatic, is it an automatic no if you, I guess, came into the country using someone else's name? Can you fix it?
Yes, you can absolutely fix that. And we handle cases like this all the time because, and I'll just give you, if you guys have a couple of minutes, I'll tell you. Yes. We see this so often, especially for people who entered in the 80s and 90s, where the only thing you needed to travel into the country was a birth paper, right? And so a lot of people sent their kids with somebody else's passport or whatever it is, or you travel on your cousin's passport and things like that. What that is, it's classified as a misrepresentation, right? You presented yourself as a person who you were not. But in most cases, you are lawfully admitted as your alias. You are lawfully admitted as Jane Doe, but you are really Janet Brown. Right. What you're going to need when you go to do your green card application is a waiver of that misrepresentation. To qualify for the waiver, you have to be able to prove that it's going to be an extreme hardship to your spouse or your parent. Those are the qualifying relatives, your spouse or your parent, right? That you, if you don't get this waiver, it would be an extreme hardship to them. And that's how you go around fixing that, right? I saw a question about DACA just come in. DACA is still alive, right? For people who already have DACA, continue to renew your DACA. We wait to see what happened. I am actually one of, I disagree with a lot of my colleagues. I've followed a lot of the Trump campaign speeches on immigration. I've looked at it, and I actually am optimistic that possibly one thing that may get done is giving the dreamers lawful status, right? I think he said it that, hey, we want to do this. He said if we can get past the show of force phase and get into real business, he wants to give green cards to people who graduate from US colleges and universities and make a path for them to do that on their own, right? That may be possible. So I'm hopeful to see what happens. We are in show of force. So just keep that in mind, remain calm, do what you can do to normalize your status under the laws as they currently exist.
Awesome. We have so much amazing information. One last question and we're going to let you go. If someone came in from, like, say, Mexico, because I see that's been a big thing too. Someone from the Caribbean comes via Mexico, is that fixable?
It depends, you know, as most things under law, it just depends on when they entered, right? So we had some very strict laws over the last couple of years that really limited what you can do if you entered into the country illegally, right? Typically, there's a bar on applications for asylum. But if you're going to be applied for by a family member and you entered through the border illegally, there are mechanisms for you to possibly get a waiver of that unlawful entry, but it's going to require you to go back to your home country and do your interview there and re-enter legally. That's the process. The worst part about that process right now is the processing time. So you're looking at, on average, start to finish in getting that type of status fixed anywhere between 5 to 6 years.
Wow.
Even if you're married to a US citizen.
And you may have to go home and wait for that?
No, you apply for a waiver stateside. You stay here while the waiver is pending. Once the waiver is approved, you then go through the consulate processing and you really go home just for the interview, right? And we've done, I can't count, numerous amounts of those successfully. We haven't had any issues with it, knock on wood, fingers crossed, you know, holy water, all the whole thing, right? We're batting 100% on that. So that's good. But we also do a full evaluation of your case to make sure you're eligible and that the risk to you of doing that is very low.
Sasha, give us your phone number again as we wrap up tonight.
So you can reach us at 407-802-3223. Like I said, all our social media handles are HAWM Law. You know, we practice immigration law, we practice family law, we practice criminal law. You know, one of the good things for us is that we have that, what we call crimmigration specialty, where we are looking at both sides of the coin and evaluating it. So, you know, I tell people I deal with complex cases, the cases that have the issues, the cases that have been through all the twists and turns, bring them to us. If we can't fix it, I don't know who is.
Okay, and where do you practice? Because you're based in Florida.
Well, we're based in Florida, in Orlando, Florida. Our immigration practice is nationwide. So we're in a lot of states handling cases for clients all around the state. West Coast, East Coast, Midwest, the South. We're all over.
All right. Thank you so much. Dr. Arlene, do you have any last words as we wrap up?
Just want to say thank you, Attorney Watts.
No problem.
By at such a time like this when the anxiety level is so high and there's so many questions, but you have given us the meat for this evening.
Stop watching the news, right? You gotta wait until the show of force operation is complete. Give it a 90 days. You know, if you check the news, go on the Associated Press, check the, you know, BBC, you know, once a week. Because at the end of the day, you can worry yourself to death and you're meant, and you know, it's not going to add not even a second to your life, right? So try to stay away from the news at this time because it's really not to our benefit.
Yes. And thanks again, Donna. This is vital, especially for our people of color and from, you know, the Caribbean islands. And from as well, but we need this. And thank you for your expertise.
And if your listeners want more information, I'll try to do weekly roundup. I'll probably post this as my weekly roundup on our YouTube channel, but go on YouTube. That's where the updates are coming out of.
Good.
Thank you. We've got a couple people on our Zoom. Anybody want to say anything real quick, or we're gonna wrap up? Going once? No, we have
I'm Donna. Good night, Donna. The other Donna, D.A., not D.
Yes, I'm gonna put you back on camera real quick.
I forget. Let me put it on.
There you go.
Yeah, I totally forget. It's the work brain. I worked last night and I went out this morning and I didn't get home till late, and then I went out again, come back. So I even sent it to my daughter, who's a lawyer in New York, for her to tune in, but she texted me back to say she's in some other meeting. So I said, oh my God, I forget that I sent it to her and I didn't go on. So I hope what was said here tonight, it's meat with gravy, and that you know, since we have experienced Jamaican, it seems, with all the information, I'm just happy that we have our own people that we can trust and look to help us through this perilous time.
The show off period. That's all it is.
It's a show of force.
All right, everyone. So we want to thank you again for watching us, for joining in this important topic that impacts all of us. All of us. All right. So, but with that, thank you so much, Attorney Sasha Watson. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Glad to be here and happy to share the information.
Yes, and I had your number written down somewhere again, and now I'm looking for it. 407.
I'll drop it in the chat. I'm dropping it in the chat.
407-802 for those of you on Facebook. 3223.
Yes.
All right.
All
Be
right.
blessed,
Have a great
everyone.
night.
Bye-bye.